and good Friday morning to you.
Good to be. Are you going to be flying or driving this weekend?
Neither.
Staying at home. Also a good option. The third option.
We begin this morning in Washington, where it appears progress is being made in the debt ceiling negotiations.
A source familiar with the talks says a deal is close. President Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy have told negotiators to keep working, and a Republican aide tells NBC News an agreement could come as soon as today. If that happens, they could vote right after the Memorial Day holiday. But Speaker McCarthy says getting to the finish line is a challenge.
There's no agreement. Look, it's not easy. This is a big issue, and it's not something you can solve easily. We want to make sure it's worthy of the American people, and we'll continue to work until we get it done.
NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba and congressional correspondent Julie Serkin are following it all for us. Good morning to both of you. So, Monica, let's start with you. President Biden met with McCarthy one-on-one earlier this week. He's been optimistic a deal can be reached, but he's a veteran of this process and knows this isn't going to be easy, right?
Not going to be easy, Joe, and nothing is final until everything is agreed to. So even though there has been progress, both sides say on several key issues, the ones that are outstanding could still totally gum up the process here. So now it does seem that as negotiators have been working around the clock, there has been this agreement that ideally they need to get something done in the time frame of today or tomorrow in order to really get this in the form of a bill that then can be put before the House so that all the legislative steps that normally need to take place for something like this can happen before default. But we heard that message from the president again yesterday, stressing this urgency. And look, he came back early from that foreign trip, canceling the Australia portion, remember, to come back to Washington to try to oversee some of these critical talks. And this is what he had to say about where things stand and the real pressure points right now.
Economic progress will be made, and we're going to continue to make it. Default puts all that at risk. Congressional leaders understand that, and they've all agreed there will be no default. Speaker McCarthy and I have a very different view of who should bear the burden of additional efforts to get our fiscal house in order. I don't believe the whole burden should fall on the backs of middle class and working class Americans. My House Republican friends disagree.
This really comes down to fundamental differences between the two parties in the way they see spending and the way they see the budget. And we always knew that that was going to be a big part of the conversation here. But both, again, seem to agree that raising the debt ceiling is non-negotiable, is a non-starter, is something they both want to do because they don't want to see Americans suffer the consequences of doing this, which really, as we all know and have been talking about for weeks now, has never before happened, Joe and Valerie.
So, Julie, let's talk about the House Republican friends, as the president referred to them just a moment ago. What are they saying about the talks?
Well, we heard Monica say there that both sides are committed to avoiding default, but it's how they get there that they have the major differences in. And one of the biggest sticking points we're seeing continue here is work requirements, right? This issue that Republicans put on the table, not just in spending cuts, but really in something they really want to achieve in putting higher restrictions for Americans to be able to qualify for certain social safety net benefits. That seems to still be one of the larger issues that they are trying to work out. We heard from Republicans all week as they've been in the Capitol meeting with White House negotiators, sometimes having the biggest microphone more than the White House has, much Democrats' frustration. But when it comes to this issue, you know that Democrats under Leader Jeffries aren't really able to get all there. He's concerned that Republicans might not be able to have enough votes to then meet Democrats in the middle at the end there when it comes to this issue. Take a listen to what Garrett Graves had to say yesterday, who's the top Republican really in the room for McCarthy.
Their efforts actually put in jeopardy those very benefits to senior citizens like Medicare and Social Security because they're refusing to negotiate on work requirements.
So that's the major hang-up at this point?
No, we have a lot of hang-ups, but that's one of the bigger issues that we're dealing with.
Do you think it's possible to get a deal by this weekend?
Look, we're not going to stop negotiating.
They're obviously on the process, but as I sit here 1 week ago from today, this issue was still one of the main issues on the table. And it's because, as Biden has said, Democrats really don't want to impose stricter work requirements. They don't want to unravel also some of the progress they've been able to make in the first 2 years of the president's term. And so this really all comes down to what they're able to swallow, what each side is able to have their members put down. And so it's not clear heading into the weekend if they're able to get there.
So, Monica, the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says that June 1st deadline isn't going to move. Either we get a deal by then or the U.S. risks not being able to pay all of its debts. At that point, the Biden administration is going to have to start deciding which ones to pay. Real quickly, tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, so likely bondholders that are owed interest would be first up on the list. And so making those kinds of payments means there would be delays on other really important things, checks that the government cuts all the time, like Social Security, federal benefits, specifically for veterans and their families. So if you go in that order, that is why we've been talking about millions of Americans being affected here, not to mention the fact that this could trigger a recession, which means high job loss, and just the uncertainty factor here of being in a place that we never have been before. So we really don't know about what the economy could end up doing catastrophically here. And then there's also the issue of a credit downgrade. You already saw one of the credit agencies kind of give a warning, putting the U.S. on notice that that could happen, which did happen back in 2011. Even though a deal was reached, they ended up actually still downgrading the credit of the U.S. in the days that followed because of how close they got to the brink. Joe and Valerie.
High stakes as we head into the holiday weekend. Monica and Julie, thank you both. Memorial Day weekend is here, kicking off what is expected to be a huge travel season this summer.
AAA says this Memorial Day will be the third busiest day for travel in the agency's history, with nearly 43 million Americans traveling 50 miles or more from home this weekend. That's up 7% overall from last year. And for those of you who are choosing to drive, there's some good news as you prepare to hit the road. Gas prices are significantly down compared to this time last year. Whether you're going by plane, car, bus, or train, we've got team coverage to help you have a smooth trip. NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman has your weather forecast for the holiday weekend. And CNBC Markets and investing reporter Pippa Stevens has a look at what you can expect to pay at the pump. We'll get to them in just a moment. But first, let's get to NBC News correspondent Tom Costello with more on this busy holiday travel season. Good morning, Tom.
Yeah, good morning. So things are moving along pretty well so far today. This is the second busiest day, according to the FAA, of the long weekend travel. And so we've got about 50,000 flights expected today, about 2.5 million. I just checked. We have only right now about 90 delays nationwide, only about 9 cancellations. So things are moving pretty well. Now, listen, this all comes, of course, a year after that Memorial Day meltdown began a series of problems for the entire summer across the country. By the end of the summer, we had 20% of all flights delayed. We had numerous situations where the airlines simply did not have the staff to fly the routes, the schedules that they had promised. Since then, the airlines say that they have hired thousands of pilots, thousands of flight attendants, ground crews, as well as gate agents, etc., to ensure that they don't have a repeat this year of what happened last year. Nearly every one of them says that they are absolutely determined not to have a repeat. We're going to be watching all of this very closely as in the meantime, the FAA has now opened 169 new highways in the sky, if you will, high altitude routes. That, they hope, will speed things along and also help cut costs on fuel. All of this coming also as most Americans are driving. 37 million Americans are actually hitting the roads. Right now, they're paying on average about $3.57 a gallon. The national average a year ago was $4.60, so considerably cheaper than where we were just a year ago. Back here at the airport, as we watch all of the activity this weekend, the FAA also coordinating with NASA and the DOD to try to limit the rocket launches out of Florida. They've had so many that has also interfered with air traffic. And the FAA says, as they have tried to deal with all of the shortages of air traffic controllers in New York, they've actually seen airlines trim their schedules, but they've added bigger planes. So as a result, they're still getting the same, if not more, passengers coming into New York, even despite the fact that they're trimming their schedules. Busy day here. It's going to be a busy weekend. Guys, back to you.
All right, thanks, Tom. And if you are not flying and driving, let's get to more on the gas prices. CNBC Markets and investing reporter Pippa Stevens joins us now. Pippa, thanks for being here. So gas prices, what are they looking like this morning as drivers prepare to hit the road?
So right now, the national average is $3.57. That's almost $1 less than last year. So that is very good for people who are hitting the road. Of course, we've all been stressed by sky-high inflation at a 40-year high. And so gas prices coming down is a huge help for the American consumer. That said, at $3.57, 2007, the national average is higher than over the last 5 years, apart from that anomaly in 2022. So it still is higher, but remember, last year it topped out above $5. So it certainly has come down as we've seen oil prices retreat.
Of course, that price may look good or bad to some people, that average, because where are we seeing the highest? Where are we seeing the lowest prices right now?
So we really see a huge divergence across the country, and typically California does pay the most. They're at around $4.80 on their state average. Down in the South, Mississippi, currently the cheapest, right around $3. And that has to do with a lot of factors, including where our refiners are located. So those are primarily around the Gulf Coast. So if the oil is refined right there, then the transport cost to your fuel stations is lower. Look at a place like California. They also have very strict blending standards. And so their refiners are very specialized. There's not a whole lot of their specific blend, and that does drive up those costs. So a lot of it has to do with location, and then it also comes down to the state parameters and the state taxes.
And we know the good news is gas is down more than $1 from this time last year. But is that a trend that we'll continue to see over the summer?
So it's always hard to predict gas prices, but the people I've spoken with say that we're probably going to see prices increase through July 4th, probably not get to $4 on the national average, a little bit below there, and then slowly but surely retreat until Labor Day. And over the last 10 years, prices have been cheaper on Labor Day than Memorial Day in 7 out of those 10 years. So that typically is a trend we see. However, there are a lot of wild cards here, especially the price of oil. That is about 60% of what we pay at the pump. And with the ongoing war in Ukraine, there could be a lot of disruptions to the global oil market. There's also the risk of a hurricane later on in the summer that could take a refinery offline. So while prices are more than $1 lower right now, it's definitely, not certain, and there are a lot of things that could change that.
All right.
Depends on a lot of stuff. You mentioned California prices. I'm having flashbacks to my time in L.A. where prices were high, and there was a gas station with normal California prices, and across the street there was one that was 75 cents more always. And people still filled up. Wow. I could never figure it out. Never.
You got to shop around for gas prices.
Exactly.
Pippa Stevens, thank you. We appreciate it.
The holiday weekend is starting with a washout for the southeast. Let's get a check on your morning news now weather.
Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us now with your forecast. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning to you both. Great to see you. Yeah, we're looking at some really nasty conditions in the southeast, especially tomorrow in the Carolinas, a complete washout. We're looking at some beach hazards as well. But if you're traveling, as Tom mentioned, and Pippa, we're looking at some roadways that are going to be slow in the air in some spots, mainly in the Intermountain West, portions of the central and southern plains. And we're looking at the southeast as well, with a coastal low spinning off the coast. So those are the big major stories. We're looking at a nice day, though, in the Northeast, New England, the Midwest. Really picture perfect on this Friday. That will change, though, for the later part of the weekend, but we'll enjoy it today and also tomorrow before we see that weather kind of turn a bit on Sunday and Monday for some. But let's talk about that coastal low, because this is going to be a big story over the next couple of days. We have that area of low pressure just spinning slowly off the coast. It's bringing those scattered showers today, and it's bringing some rough seas to the southeast beaches. So not a great beach day today. Not a washout in Florida today, but it will be a washout tomorrow in portions of the Carolinas. Notice all those bright colors showing up. That's where we're seeing that heavy rain falling. So portions of North Carolina, South Carolina, soaking rains. We're going to see rip currents and rough surf along the coast. And in fact, we do have some advisories up and down the coast. Then we look towards Sunday, soggy and breezy day for much of the mid-Atlantic. Isolated showers, especially in that southern part of the mid-Atlantic. Steadier rain for the southern parts of the Appalachians. And then by Monday, we're going to see a few more showers. So we're looking at coastal conditions impacted through Saturday. Dangerous rip currents and waves. We do have a high surf advisory. That's in the purple from Cape Hatteras down to Charleston, Savannah, Daytona Beach, and also Melbourne, Florida. Minor beach erosion and coastal flooding is likely. We're also looking at beach hazards in portions of Virginia as well. Rainfall amounts, we're talking a lot. So this is going to be an indoor day for many. It's going to be gusty too. So it's going to be just a dreary day. Locally, 5 inches of rain, especially where you see that bright red color, that brick red color, Wilmington, North Carolina. We are looking at some very heavy rain. Also adding to that, we have cloud cover. We have the winds blowing. So it's going to be cool as well in addition to that rain. Temperatures well below normal today from Virginia Beach to Augusta, Georgia, Charleston, 71 degrees. That's 15 degrees below what is typical for this time of year. Terrible way to start out the holiday weekend. And we're going to keep it chilly tomorrow, too. Charlotte, North Carolina, just temperatures in the upper 50s, 26 degrees below what is typical for this time of year, 68 degrees tomorrow in Myrtle Beach. So not a great beach day in terms of the rain, in terms of the temperatures. And we're looking at rainfall amounts amounts in the southern plains as well. And guys, we're also looking at the chance for some severe weather in the southern plains, the southern high plains later on this afternoon and evening. Back to you both.
All right. It'll be a raincoat, sweater weekend holiday for some this weekend. All right, Michelle, thank you.
The Supreme Court has weakened a key water pollution law. The justices ruled that an Idaho couple's property does not include federally protected wetlands.
The issue started back in 2007 when the Sackett family got into trouble for trying to build a house on that land. Climate experts now worry the ruling could place further limitations on the EPA's ability to enforce the Clean Water Act. We are joined now by NBC News legal contributor Danny Savalos, along with Ibrahim Al-Husseini, the founder and managing partner of Full Cycle, a company which invests specifically in climate-critical technologies. Thank you both for joining us. Danny, let's start with you. Break down this ruling for us. Help us understand the outcome and what it means.
The EPA gives federal agencies the power to regulate waters of the United States. And I put those in air quotes because what waters of the United States has varied or it's been vague up until the Supreme Court decision. On the one hand, does it include even wetlands that are somehow connected vaguely to a lake somewhere off in the distance? Or does it really include literally lakes, things that are navigable and the water immediately adjacent to it? And the point here is it's not so much that the EPA has been weakened in its ability to enforce. It can still enforce with some very, very stringent remedies, including high dollar amounts, $40,000 a day if you violate by putting pollutants into these lakes. And by the way, pollutants can include things like sand and rocks, at least according to the court here. But all it really does is narrow the area over which EPA has jurisdiction. So no longer do they have jurisdiction over simply an area of your own property that may be periodically wet, which might be a wetland. Instead, now it's more narrowly defined to a lake, some navigable water, and then something immediately adjacent to it. That's really all the court did in this case.
Ibrahim, let's bring you in. From an environmental standpoint, what is the significance of this ruling? And give us a little bit more background on the Clean Water Act.
So the EPA got created to begin with in the late 60s, early 70s, because our rivers were on fire. There were rivers that were actually catching on fire. The stench from the pollution in some of our waterways was so severe that people were putting pressure on government, and that's what created the EPA to begin with. So we need these agencies to be strong, especially in the age of runaway climate change, which we're in right now. So a ruling like this, which, as our colleague said, can put 90 million acres of wetlands in jeopardy, now muddies that water technically, and we can start, etching away at these rulings that have protected all this natural wonder, because it's, I don't know if you guys know this, but during Hurricane Katrina, the areas that were protected by wetlands had 30% less damage because of them. But we need these ecosystems. We're already at an ecological collapse point globally, and a ruling like this just sets a precedent where we're slowly degrading the laws that are protecting the natural world at a time that we need it more than ever.
Danny, real quickly here, this case, what's the precedent it could set for future cases now?
The precedent is basically, it's just a more narrow interpretation of what waters of the United States are. EPA still retains its power to control waters of the United States and specifically to prevent pollutants from being put into those waters. But, as Justice Clarence Thomas and Justice Gorsuch wrote in one of their opinions, the idea is if you make this too expansive, then EPA becomes more like a local zoning board, because if you have a property and you have a front lawn and that is a waterway, deemed to be a waterway, then now it's EPA that can regulate what you do with that front lawn. And to be more precise, maybe we're talking about a large property with maybe some wetlands on it. And really what wetlands are may be open to interpretation as well. So, yes, it narrows the geographic scope of EPA and the enforcement ability, but the power is not diminished at all. As long as we're talking about wetlands that are adjacent to a lake or other navigable water, then EPA is going to be able to enforce no problem. It's just the geographic expanse, the jurisdictional scope that has been narrowed.
Ibrahim, let's switch gears and talk about another similar issue. A new report was released earlier this week about the impact that climate change could potentially have on the United States' ability to train members of the military. Talk to us more about that.
So think about Navy SEALs, training on the beach. And that beach has more surges, more flooding, or more erosion, and they have to move that entire military base. They don't have enough training days because the climate, the weather isn't cooperating enough. Think about a military operation and having planes needing to take off, but it's so hot that the runway is now rubbery and they can't take off. This could mean losing or winning a battle or a war because we literally can't deploy our military to take action because it was not designed in a time to take into account these vast temperature ranges.
So much to think about. It impacts virtually every portion of our lives.
Yeah, we live in a closed sphere in the middle of space. Everything affects everything inside of that reality, and we have to think about that. We have to think about it when we vote in our next election for representatives that are going to appoint judges that understand the science of climate change. We as business leaders and investors have to think about the impact of where we're deploying our capital for a world that is ready for a different type of climate. Everything affects everything else inside of that closed sphere, and we have to think that way.
All right, Danny Cevallos and Ibrahim Al-Husseini, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.